Hey guys, Ben on Big Stuff here. Welcome to another version 2.5 firmware update. So today we're going to be talking about the fuel pump prime shot. And what that means is in previous software versions, we didn't have the ability to, on a startup, allow fuel to go into the engine through the fuel injectors themselves. The fuel injectors would only actually open up until they wouldn't start opening up until you actually start cranking the engine. So now we've given you the ability to actually pulse the fuel injectors without the engine actually running to help get some fuel in there to help get the engine lit off quicker versus the extended cranking times. So if you want to enable this feature, all you do is go over here to the fuel settings menu, click on fuel modifier selection, and you're going to see a fuel pump prime shot up here in the upper right hand corner. We're going to click enable on this, and there's going to be some conditions here that if you're over 200 degrees, it will not work. If I'm below 198 degrees because of my hysteresis, then the table is going to be allowed to function. Okay? So if I close that back out and I go to my startup section, I'm going to have a fuel prime shot curve, right? So this is the curve. Now you have to remember this pulse time is in seconds, okay? This is in seconds. Your typical cranking curve, okay, this is the table that is used when you're actually cranking the engine over. This is cranking pulse width. So when the engine starts cranking over, it's going to be adding 18 to 14 milliseconds of fuel when the engine's actually cranking. This prime shot is based on the amount of time in seconds you want it to run. Okay. So for example, right now I'm sitting about 0.15 seconds. Okay. So that means that's about 150 milliseconds. That's open a long time. Now, the reason why you may start off that high is because if your rails are drained back, it's bone cold first thing in the morning, you got to get some fuel pressure built up. There's no reason in having it to be very short because the fuel pressure has to build, the rails got to fill up, and then that way when you're actually pulsing the injectors, you actually get something in the engine. Now, you got to play with this number. This is not a one-size-fits-all number. You may be more, you may be less. It all depends on the fuel plumbing that you have laid out. But the biggest thing you have to remember is that every time you turn off the ignition off and on, this table is going to be live depending on how you've programmed it. Okay. So I actually have a lot of engines to where over 100 degrees, I actually have no prime shot at all. It just doesn't need it. There's enough fuel that stays in suspension, especially when it's warm. It's up there in the intake manifold. It doesn't really evaporate that fast. It just seems that it doesn't want anything when it's warm. Now, when it's bone cold, though, it makes a big difference. But you got to play with it. It may not be perfect with these factory default numbers. It may want less. It may want more, okay? Because you have to remember, this is a prime shot based on just turning on the ignition. The cranking curve then takes off and then runs when you start cranking the engine. That's this table. So I'm still going to be adding 18 milliseconds of fuel when the engine's cranking over, okay, along with the actual fuel pump prime shot that I put in when the engine first starts. So you got to be careful not to flood it. A lot of times this could be barely next to anything. A lot of times, for some reason, based on the fuel rails is draining back so much, you got a lot of head pressure to push up against. This has to be up there pretty high. But the main thing to remember is that if you keep turning the the ignition off and on, this table is going to function depending on how you have it programmed. Okay, so one thing just remember, and if you get a little bit too much fuel in there at some point, you were priming, you were turning off ignition off and on a lot of times, just go to clear flood mode or hold the throttle open a little bit longer, and obviously it'll start, but you'll need to just work on this cranking time. This pulse time, so that you have the right amount of fuel in there, so when you start cranking, everything works together. Okay, so that's the fuel prime shot curve. Again, that's in version 2.5 software. If you have any questions, go to our website, www.bigstufftpm.com. You can also email us at support@bigstufftpm.com or send us a message on Facebook or Instagram. Thank you very much.